Hey RCC family, my name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm so glad you found us here online and you can watch one of these messages here online. The goal of these messages is to help you represent Jesus well right where you're at, and we're so glad you can do that here. If you'd like to get connected with a church, whether us as a staff or in different ways, you can go down to the links below. You can do that through the links to get connected. You can also go on social media and find us on social media through those links. And then finally, if you want to continue to support the ministries of RCC, you can find a way to give there. We're so excited that you're a part of this church family and that you want to continue to grow your faith and grow in your ability to represent Jesus well right where you're at.
Good morning. Good morning. I just loved worship this morning, and also what Carolyn was saying. The whole theme of redemption and freedom is throughout this whole morning, and I'm just so excited about this time with you. So if you haven't met me yet, my name is Meg, and I'm honored to serve on the staff team here at RCC. And you made it. This is the last Sunday of Close the Gap. How are you doing? How are you feeling? This has been a little bit of an uncomfortable sermon series, but a really fun sermon series. A lot of you have had some great feedback. We have been, for the past, can you believe it, 5 Sundays, we have been trying to expose and shine a light on that restless feeling that we all feel, and we're really well acquainted with. The thought or the emotions that kind of nag at us and like, is this really all there is? Why do I still feel tension? I'm called to be a new creation, right? Am I a Christian? What's going on here? Why on earth do I still feel this unrest, this gap between who I am on the day-to-day and who God calls me to be? This unrest, restlessness, exhaustion, tiredness. Most of us, we know that when we have a full schedule and a lot going on, it can be hard to feel rested. Duh, right? But hustle and busyness aren't the only things that get in our way and cause exhaustion and unrest. Honestly, it's possible to have a lot of alone time, a lot of margin on your schedule, and still experience exhaustion, unrest. Whether you're a mom of young kids and you feel like a taxi. Lately, I feel like a taxi. I don't know if anybody else can relate. And you're juggling too many schedules, or maybe you're newly retired, you're trying to navigate a completely new season and find a new groove, or you're a high school or a college student, you're just trying to keep up with your class schedule, the social schedule, just trying to keep up. Or maybe you are in the thick of your career, your family, and you are just trying to keep up, right? Or you're in the back, behind the scenes throughout your life, and you like it that way. You just like to keep the balls in the air, and you think to yourself, yeah, that's okay. Rest is for other people, not for me. Wherever you might find yourself, we all experience exhaustion. It's a feeling we are well acquainted with. And unfortunately, I think we've just kind of accepted it. You know, have you heard, I'll just sleep when I'm dead? I've heard that way too many times. Or even, this one makes me so incredibly sad. This is just the way it is. It's this way for everyone. Today's topic makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Honestly, y'all, I hate talking about this stuff. When I saw the sermon series schedule and saw that I had to talk about Sabbath and rest, I was like, come on. Why me? It makes me so uncomfortable. We talk about this stuff, but yet we know nothing's really changing. What gives? Today, you've probably gathered, we're talking about the practice of taking a Sabbath. We're talking about rest. And I think rest and Sabbath and just pausing, having margin in your day, quiet space, is something that is wildly misunderstood in our society. Something that we all have different backgrounds and hesitations about that we bring into it. And something we all know we probably should do more of, but we struggle to know how or why. So, this unrest we feel, do we care? Do we care about it, or do we just accept it? Is this just the way it is? Like I said, this topic makes me uncomfortable. I really struggled. This is like my 5th or 6th version of this talk, so here we go, guys. I hope you like it. But I honestly feel very convicted that this is the message I need to give today. And I don't want to be up here just spouting off things. I've been in that position where I've been listening to someone and it just sounds so trite and I feel so misunderstood. And also, like I shared, I'm just really sad about this topic. The pace that so many of us are moving, myself included, is just outstanding. It's crazy. The unresolved emotions that I think a lot of us are feeling and numbing, the relationships that are strained because of the expectations or the schedules we keep, the deep, deep unresolved hurt that we all walk around with, the emotions that weirdly pop out of nowhere because we are not well rested, whether that be physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Y'all. Don't get me even started on our schedules. Actually, right now, and yesterday too, we're supposed to be at a soccer tournament. And it's great. We have 5 people in our family. Every Sunday, I swear we sit down for, I think it's only going to be 20 minutes, but it ends up being like 2.5 hours, just coordinating all the schedules every Sunday. It's like we're coordinating a huge, big event with lots of moving parts all the time, and there's always boundaries that are pushed up against, things we have to say no to, and it stinks. I was just getting notifications 5 minutes ago from the soccer team. Y'all, I get this. This is so hard and something that I am living too. But what is it going to take? Does it hurt enough to change how we're living? Guys, here we talk a lot about we're called to be representatives. It's in our mission statement, right? We're called to be representatives, to let our light shine, as it says in Matthew 5, so that others can see God through our actions and how we're living. It's our mission statement. And I was thinking about this today. What is the opposite of a shining light? It's a light that is burnt out. It's literally the best strategy for the enemy to get at us and inhibit us from who we're called to be. The person that God calls us to be, that gap that we're talking about, is by burning us out. And we do this to ourselves. Last Sunday, Pastor Sam, check out that sermon. He talked about how we cannot give what we already have not received ourselves. He challenged us to see ourselves the way that God sees us. In that it's not until we're really able to see ourselves in love, just the way we are right now, that we're truly able to give away that same type of love to others. And I think this same concept can apply to the topic of rest or of the Sabbath, because ultimately the Sabbath is a gift, and we receive gifts. And we'll never experience the abundant rest that we read about in Scripture and that Jesus talks about or offers us if we don't see it as a gift, and that it's okay for us to receive it. Or maybe this one hurts a little bit, that we're worthy enough right now, as we are, to receive it. And since we're in this series called Close the Gap, I'd argue that the weekly or daily practice of pausing, reconnecting to God, reminding yourself that you have access to this gift is one of the most tangible ways we can continuously practice closing this gap between who we're called to be and who we are on a day-to-day basis and who God is calling us to be. Because I don't know about you, maybe this is just me, but when I am well rested and my perspective is focused on God being the person that holds up everything in my life versus it all resting on my shoulders, I'm much more the person God calls to me. And I'm also much more fun to be around. But I think the practice of taking a Sabbath, this is wildly helpful and it's necessary and important, but I can't tell you how many men and women I see stressing about the principles of how or why, or it just stops them from even engaging with the concept of rest. They discount themselves even before they can engage in it, which tells me there has to be an underlying issue, right? There has to be something underneath that we have to address before we can even think about the practice of a Sabbath. So, are you ready to go there? We're going to do it? Okay, we're going to start here. I'm a researcher, so I start with definitions, y'all. So I looked it up. this week, and the definition of a Sabbath specifically says the Sabbath is a day of religious observance and abstinence from work, kept by Jewish people from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and by most Christians on Sunday. And that's correct, I would say. But I'd also argue that the Sabbath, as we've been talking about, is a gift to us. It's God's gift to us. Mark chapter 2, verse 27 says, "Then Jesus said to them, 'The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath.'" Our Father, who loves us, who made us intentionally, has compassion towards us. And he gave us the gift of rest once a week, but also daily, so that we can get a reprieve from the brokenness and the heaviness of the world. He knew we would need it. It's not about performing or doing it right or keeping the rules. I do think it is important to honor God and connect with him and realign our perspective with his, but the whole point of it is that it's his gift to us because he loves us. Psalm 127 verse 2 says, "It's useless to rise early and go to bed late and work your worried fingers to the bone. Don't you know he enjoys giving rest to those he loves?" The Sabbath is God's gift to us. And it's in the Old and the New Testament. We find it first in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. "So the creation of the heavens and of the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from the work of his creation." The Sabbath is a chance to pause long enough to rest and receive gifts from God. It's a chance to pause long enough to purge yourself of things that truly don't satisfy you, all those distractions, so that you can be fully satisfied and surrender to the only source that does. You know, it's also a chance to just stop and look back on your week. How many of us do that? Just look back on your week and think, sheesh, job well done. I worked hard at what God called me to. Probably didn't get it all done, but you know what? I did my best. And no matter what status my work is at, I did what God called me to do, and I get to receive this gift of rest. Job well done. God's intention is to liberate us from the forces that control us and convince us that we need to work and produce and earn 24/7, 365. Have you stopped long enough lately? When's the last time can you remember that you stopped to ask yourself, like, what am I bound to? What am I enslaved to? Could it maybe be emails, your work emails, those pings that come in? Email, text messages, your phone. Maybe it's entertainment. What about the Amazon Buy Now button? That's way too easy. Or, maybe it's making sure your kid is in the latest activity, or that they're happy, or that you have their approval. Or maybe it's being seen as the strong, responsible one that doesn't let anybody else down, is always there, is always dependable. What is it that keeps you bound? Practicing the Sabbath allows us to pause long enough to reevaluate, where am I seeking approval, connection, direction, or love? Is it God? Or is it something else that I keep running to that's really keeping me running on empty? God wants us to trust in his provision. The practice of a Sabbath reminds us that we are dependent on God, that he is the hero in our story, not us. And remembering this is incredibly important for our souls. So the Sabbath, it's not only a gift, it's a sign, a symbol, a lived reality of freedom from oppression. And more on that later. The Sabbath is also an ancient practice from God that began at creation, was cemented after the Israelites fled Egypt, and was fulfilled and given greater meaning with Jesus. The Sabbath, it is not legalistic. Believe it or not, it's not a vacation. It's not a quick fix, a silver bullet, or all silence and solitude. Okay, are we good? Great. Y'all know what a Sabbath is and what it isn't. I can just go. We're good. Right? No, if it was that easy, we would do it. Oh my goodness. It's not that easy, is it? Y'all, I get annoyed. I guess I get annoyed a lot. I get annoyed when people make it sound that easy. It sounds so trite and oversimplified and insensitive. But before we can get to why we still need it and how we can actually live it, even in our busy lives, we have to dig deeper into the reason for it. And to do that, we need to talk about desire. Now, that's a really fun word, right? Y'all excited? Desire. There's something about the speed of modern life that does not allow our human flourishing or even just maintaining a standard level of health, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And we know this. I don't need to share any stats. I'm sick of sharing stats of how hurried our life is and how stressed out we are. But despite that, I think there is something even deeper than the speed of our lives. Like I said earlier, hustle and busyness aren't the only things that get in our way or cause exhaustion. It's possible for us to have a lot of white space on our calendar, to live alone, to have a lot of time on our hands and still experience exhaustion. And that's why I think there's something else underneath the issue, or something else at play here. I think it's desire. We are humans with unquenchable desire, infinite desire. We are rarely satisfied. We rarely feel like we have enough. The song came to mind way too often this week. Oh my gosh, you guys. That was in my head all week long. Now it is in your heads. You are welcome. My gift to you, but also how creepy is that video? So creepy. But yes, I can't get no satisfaction. We can only be satisfied by God. We are made by God, made for God, made to need God, made to run on God. We can only be satisfied by the one who is infinite and eternal and made to supply our needs. God is infinite, meaning that he is limitless, endless in space, extent, size, impossible to measure or calculate. We, as humans, are only at rest in God. And when we fall away from God, the desire for the infinite remains in us. And we try to fill it with things that disappoint us and fail us. This feeling, it rushes in when we pause, when we try to get quiet, to stop producing, right? And that's a scary feeling, this restless feeling of not having enough, or I should be doing something, or I'm not enough right now. Have you felt this when you try to pause? Okay, quick question. How many of you reach for your phone to distract yourself when you have a few minutes on your hands? You know what I mean? Or you go right, maybe one of you, or some of you go right to fixing something or tidying. I am a tidier, and it is horrible. I feel like our kids get a glass out, and I'm like, okay, let me wipe quick underneath. When I feel unrest, I'm tidying around me. We have this chronic state of restlessness, tension, disappointment, exhaustion, which when we feel these emotions, that propels us to take things into our own control and live a life full of hurry, achieving, buying new things, gaining approval, whatever we think will quench that feeling of restlessness or distract us from that uncomfortable feeling. But in all reality, we're just exasperating that issue and essentially pouring gasoline on it. We're in a moment of intense exhaustion, and we cannot fulfill our desires despite how we think we can. Have you ever thought about this? It's going to blow your mind. We are finite humans. Think about it. We can only live in one city. We can only be in one place at one time, doing one thing. We can't even multitask. Nobody can multitask, I know it. Our actions and decisions lead us to live a very finite life. We are not infinite like God. And because of that, nothing less than God will satisfy us. Many of us, we say that we'll take a day off. We'll chill out. Maybe it's a Saturday or a Sunday for you, depending on your schedule. And maybe during this day, you catch up on chores around the house. Maybe you go shopping, check out what's on sale. Maybe you go out to eat, scroll on your phone, just kind of check out, watch a few things on Netflix or a few movies. And none of these things, y'all, are evil. Desires are not bad to have. But maybe, could they be disordered? Do they maybe cross the line? Does it cause you to act like something other than God will satisfy you? If this is your set-apart time to recharge, remind yourself of what's true, realign yourself, let go of the things that distract or exhaust you, help you practice closing the gap, maybe this isn't that smart, and I'm guilty here too. So where do we go, right? Okay, we know all this. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30 says, "Then Jesus said, 'Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble, gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light.'" I really, really love, actually, the Message version and how it translates these verses. It says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Yikes. Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." Yee. Jesus, he calls us to live in a way that's grounded, rooted in rest. He promises freely and lightly. One of my favorite scriptures right now, actually for quite a few years, is John 15. I love that chapter. It's all about staying attached to the vine being Jesus, and abiding or resting in, staying connected to him. And the only way that we can grow good things is through abiding and staying connected. It's not through striving or achieving or by developing a 5-step plan or by trying harder or forcing positivity or ignoring the problem, despite what everything and everyone around us tells us. But it's by resting in God, abiding in God. And if we remove ourselves from the vine, maybe that can happen through a crazy schedule, or maybe that happens through repeated sin that just builds up over time that we numb out and don't confess, or from unresolved emotions that we don't address, or from distractions and numbing out with entertainment. If we remove ourselves from that vine, we will not bear fruit. We'll just bear a lot of gross stuff, like resentment, stress, exhaustion, emotions, again, that pop up out of nowhere. And just as Pastor Sam said last week, we cannot experience what we haven't already received. We cannot enjoy peace, patience, gentleness, joy, fruits of the Spirit, if we cut ourselves off from the vine, the true source of rest. What might be cutting you off from the vine or from true rest? All right, I bet you're like, hold on. What's this chick talking about? We're talking about the Sabbath. I thought this was about the Sabbath. And now you're talking about Jesus and the vine. Didn't Jesus break the Sabbath? Yes. Good question. Let's start. We're going to go into a little more history, and then we'll talk about what Jesus did with the Sabbath. God actually wove the Sabbath into our rhythms, which blows my mind if you think about it. We still have the rhythm of the Sabbath baked into our culture on Saturdays and Sundays from all these thousands of years ago. Crazy, right? We still have church on Sundays. We still partake in this rhythm. What God did with creation and resting on the seventh day is what he wants to do for us. In Exodus, he says, "Tell the people of Israel, be careful to keep my Sabbath day, for the Sabbath is a sign of the covenant between me and from generation to generation. It is given so you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. You must keep the Sabbath day, for it is a holy day for you. Anyone who desecrates it must be put to death. Anyone who works on that day will be cut off from the community." Woo! Wow, sounds important, doesn't it? It is. First off, there's totally different tones from the Old and the New Testament when the Sabbath is mentioned. And that's intentional. The theme of the Sabbath in the Old Testament, it needed to be intense. God needed to break the Israelites out of their habit of working all 7 days as slaves. But as I was reading these verses this week, another thing stood out to me. The verses also say, be careful to keep my Sabbath day, for the Sabbath is a sign of the covenant. All right, signs point to something, right? He says it's a sign. So a sign of what? In Deuteronomy chapter 15, it says, remember that you were once slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. This is why I'm giving you this command to keep the Sabbath. It's a sign of redemption and freedom. Whew. Right? So God, he created a rhythm of creation for us to follow that we still follow. And it's a sign of the covenant because it shows redemption, freedom. Keep the Sabbath because I'm the one who saved you. In Deuteronomy, God, he is reminding us of how he's reminding the Israelites how he parted the Red Sea. You know, guys, they were standing there. They were goners. The other army was coming up, getting them. They were goners. And he totally led them through. He's reminding them. He saved them. We cannot do a thing to save ourselves. We can only watch God save us. And so, yes, the Sabbath, it's part of creation, a rhythm that God built into creation for us to follow, to experience his gift of rest, but it's also a sign of redemption. A reminder that our salvation, it's not earned. It's not through trying harder or by works. It's through God saving us. God keeps the world functioning even when we're not working. So rest to remember that God is the one who sets us free. This all sounds great, right? But is this a rule? Are we commanded to do this? How do we experience this freedom? And as I was doing research for today, there are many places in the Bible where Jesus got in trouble a lot for not keeping the Sabbath. He was quite a rebel. In Jewish culture, the Sabbath is a holy day. It started on Friday night and ended on Saturday night, and you were supposed to do absolutely no work. In Mark chapter 2, and there's a lot of stories like this, in Mark chapter 2, you see Jesus, he's walking through the fields with his disciples, and they're just walking around, picking heads of grain and eating it, and there's people on the fringes of the fields, religious leaders on the fringes of the field, just kind of watching them, and they're getting really angry with Jesus, and they're like, hey, you're technically harvesting, which is technically working, which today's the Sabbath, so you're breaking the Sabbath. And Jesus, he's not going to have any of it. He's like, hold up, no. Don't mess with the Sabbath is about. Sabbath is a gift for my people to restore them, not legalistic. It's a gift, which was a great argument. But then Jesus, he goes on and he says something else. He says, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And to that, they're like, huh? Say what? What is this guy saying? And there's another story in the Gospels. It's in the book of John where a man comes up to Jesus on, the Sabbath, and he can't walk. And it's almost like people are around Jesus. They're on looking, and they're like, oh, no. He's gonna do it. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna choose to heal this man on the Sabbath? And Jesus is like, yeah. God set the Sabbath to set people free, so I'm gonna set him free. And the man, he got up and he walked away. And they got so angry again. So angry again. Not only was Jesus breaking the Sabbath, but he was also claiming equality with God, which they for sure did not like. It's almost as if Jesus is fulfilling and defining the purpose of the Sabbath in these verses. Because remember what we read earlier in Matthew 11? Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble, gentle, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. Jesus is the ultimate Sabbath, the one who brings ultimate rest. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. So, do we have to keep the Sabbath as a rule? Romans 14, verses 5 through 6 says, in the same way, I think one day is more holy than another day, while others think every day is alike. You should each be fully convinced that whichever day you choose is acceptable. Those who worship the Lord on a special day do it to honor him. Essentially, The rule isn't as important as the motivation. The Sabbath is all about Jesus. True rest comes from Jesus, from reminding yourself where your worth, your acceptance, your value comes from. And when we're attached to that vine or to Jesus, instead of cut off or disconnected from chasing our own desires or worth through acquiring things, through numbing out, through distracting ourselves, through feeling important, we experience true rest. No matter what our schedule looks like, no matter what our circumstances are. So, how do we stay connected? How do we experience the Sabbath rest? Some of you maybe already do this, but some of you may choose to set aside a day to honor the Lord, to reconnect to the vine, and that's great. The rule is over, no longer binding, but the rhythm of creation still exists, which means we still benefit from and need rest. But let's get practical, right? Matthew 11 starts with, "Come to me, all who are weary." There's an action that's needed to happen. It's not, "Oh, I'm Christian now. Abundant rest is now mine. Okay, yay, let's do this." There's deliberate action that's needed. Are you taking that action? Are you moving toward God? Okay, so let's talk about actions, right? And this isn't a 3-step solve, but I'm assuming most of you might find yourself in one of these 3 situations this morning. Maybe this first situation resonates. You're way too busy. You don't think there's even room to add another thing. You can't receive if your hands are full. You can't give what you haven't received. For you, you can just start small. Try to build a little bit of a rhythm for yourself. Here's some ideas. Build a little bit of margin in the beginning or the end of your day to be with God and not produce. That can mean going for a walk. That can be reading your Bible, drinking your coffee slowly, playing with your kids uninterrupted with your phone away from you. Whatever helps you delight in God's gifts, moves you closer to God, and also takes you out of the producing role. Put it on your calendar. People might ask if you have something going on, and guess what? You do. It's on your calendar. You're busy connecting with God. Explore how you can connect with God best. Have fun with it. Also know that it is possible to experience rest in spite of your schedule. Sometimes there are busy seasons. Sometimes we find ourselves and it's just full. But also remember that busy seasons do have ends, and there is deliberate action that's needed. Okay, here's another scenario. Maybe you do have a day off a week, and you do try to rest, but you can't quite seem to quiet your mind. Maybe you feel like you're just a little broken. You think this whole Sabbath thing is for other people, not for you. It just doesn't work. Remind yourself of the purpose of a Sabbath. Are you still rushing around trying to accomplish things or get other things done that you haven't gotten to yet? Catch up on everything? You'll never finish your task lists every week. It's just not possible. It's a stinky feeling, but it's not possible. And pausing or resting when you still have things to do shows your faith and trust in God and His provision, not in yourself. So how can you change how you view rest and what you turn to for rest? When you pause, do you have emotions that you don't want to feel and that's why you busy yourself? Are you numbing or distracting yourself with entertainment or other things? What would it look for you to connect with God, disconnect from achieving or consuming, and just receive? Okay, lastly, this third scenario, maybe you have plenty of time, but you're still tired. First off, again, let's just explore how you connect with God. What can the Sabbath look like for you? For us, it's frozen pizza and lighting a candle. You can steal that. But do you have set apart time that you actually try to set apart to connect with God? I think also we need to consider these unresolved emotions that a lot of us walk around with. There's a truth about humans. Sometimes we carry things that aren't seen. Our exhaustion can just be unresolved angst, grief, loneliness, longingness. Are you pausing long enough, at least once a week, to address these emotions that might prevent you from being connected to Jesus and others? Because these unresolved emotions that we're not acknowledging or giving over to Jesus can just fester and cause exhaustion when they're unaddressed. This can just look like telling God, or this can look like writing them out, getting them out of you, getting these emotions, whatever emotions they might be, out and asking God for clarity about how he's working in that situation. It can look like undistracted time praying specifically about those things and talking to God about them. And something to know, this is super important. With any type of action we do, we will experience resistance. It's just a part of it. I think we've been conditioned to think that if we experience resistance, we are doing something wrong or bad. But the resistance we feel when we try to pause, experience rest, practice a Sabbath, we need to ask for strength to work through that resistance. The world does not want us to live this way at all. The world wants us tired and angry and striving. The Sabbath was one of the first acts of resistance. It went against what everyone else was doing and believed. So, as you find time in your day and in your week to actually pause, don't be afraid or ashamed with the resistance you feel. It's going to come. Some of you might feel lonely or sad or anxious, and it's okay. Let's be people that work through those emotions with God and don't shrink back. Rest will come. He promises that for us. Read Matthew 11 again if you need to. He promises it. So, as we close, that is what we're going to pray for today. We're going to pray for Jesus to come and be with us when we're weary and to give us strength to fight through that resistance. So if you would, let's bow our heads and pray. God, thank you so much that we have this chance every week to pause together and to remind ourselves of what's true, and to remind ourselves that we have the chance to realign ourselves with your perspective and that you love us right now the way that we are. We ask for the strength to receive this gift. We ask for opportunities and clarity for how to incorporate rest within our week. And we ask for the strength to fight through that resistance when we try to incorporate it. Thank you so much for this church family and that we're able to work through this together. In your name we pray. Amen.